UFP, the United Federation of Podcasts.
Welcome to Franchise Fatigue. I'm your host, Parker Posey. I'm a good actress. Joining me is Zach.
You know, in the movies, vampires are cool. Well, it's all bullshit. I'm Deadpool, and I'm here to open this movie for no reason. You'll meet me in about 35 minutes, but I'm going to do the opening narration.
Oh boy, Parker Posey's in this movie, guys.
There's so many people in this movie, but she...
That's a choice.
Oh my goodness.
That's
she made a choice. She made a choice.
Boy, oh boy. Yeah. Like, okay, so Franchise Fatigue, where we talk about movies, remakes, and sequels. I'm your host, Brandon-Shea, UFP Earth, da-da-da-da-da-da.
Zach Moore, co-host, yeah.
Yeah. So, I think Parker Posey is fantastic as Dr. Smith in Lost in Space. But I can't think of many roles where Parker Posey is the right choice. That's for sure.
I thought she was great in Superman Returns.
Of course you did.
Did you see Superman Returns?
I did, in theaters.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. And, yes, I'm not a big Superman fan, and that movie wasn't very good.
All right, also joining us is Lance Lasser. What's up, Lance?
Hey, you know, it's hard to do these things alone, but hold on, we're going home. That's a quote by Drake. Not the one from this movie, but the rapper.
Drake. Bram Stoker's Drake. So we're talking about Blade Trinity. I had not seen this movie. I heard it was bad.
I told you.
And I'm like, what? Yeah, I've seen a lot of bad comic movies.
I told you.
Okay, people just...
I tried to warn you.
Sure, I'm sure it's bad. It's bad. It is. It lived up to my low expectations. It surpassed my low expectations. It exceeded all low expectations. This is a horrible movie. And if we had not just done Creepshow 3, I would argue that this might be the worst movie we've seen.
Creepshow 3 is worse than this movie, that's for sure.
Oh, no, absolutely it is. It's right down there with the Jaws sequels for me. This is so bad for the movies we've covered on this podcast. Because, where did it all go wrong? That's terrible.
Okay, so... here's the thing, is that I put it on, and I'm like, this isn't that bad. Why did people complain about this movie? And then Ryan Reynolds showed up.
No.
Ryan Reynolds showed up at the first line.
Yes, he's the narrator.
Saying, but I didn't have a problem with... I didn't know who that was at the time. I didn't know what's going on, right? Who knows what's going on here? But then when he shows up, and I'm like... what is he saying? Like, every single line of dialogue out of his mouth was just cringeworthy. So it really tanked after that. And I didn't hate the movie, but I'm like, this is definitely a significant drop in quality. And I don't know.
This is, of all the...
Well, I'm saying everything before we even got into the trivia.
I know. But I gotta say, of all like the superhero movies, franchises, and trilogies and stuff, has there ever been a bigger drop between two movies?
Okay, well, I'll tell you one that'll probably you guys will agree with. That I've only seen it once, and I didn't. All I've heard is people crap all over X-Men 3, right? And I really liked X-Men 3, but I've only seen it once, and it was like right when it first came out. So
well, X-Men 3, it gets a bad rap.
X-Men 3 is way better than this.
It's way better. Oh, it is light years.
And this is coming from somebody who's an X-Men fan who hated X3 when it came out.
Yeah. I thought X3 was really good when I first saw it, but I
think most like the Batman franchise, right, in the 90s and 80s and 90s is like a steady decline, right? Mm-hmm. You're like rolling down a hill. This is flying off a cliff.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
That's what this is. So,
man. I would probably I don't know what I'd rather watch, this or Batman and Robin. That'd be a tough choice.
I would much rather watch Batman and Robin.
Would you?
I would too.
Yeah, it's much more enjoyable. This isn't even fun.
Yeah, you're probably right.
But let's get into the trivia. Maybe you can shed some light on this. Even though this is the third movie in the Blade trilogy. It's the first one to have the Marvel Studios logo at the beginning. The Marvel, the comic books flickering. That this is 2004.
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of in the beginnings of the superhero renaissance on the big screen.
Well, the reason why is because they've had previous success. Thanks
to Blade.
Well, thanks to Blade, but afterwards, when Spider-Man comes out and when X-Men comes out and they do as well as they do, then it's studios and people backing them feel more confident by slapping that Marvel on there.
Yeah, well, it becomes something to be embraced instead of something to shy away from.
Correct.
Which is what it was with you watch the first Blade, it's like really small text, characters created by this guy who worked for Marvel.
Basically.
And the open, this is like Marvel right at the top.
I think they embraced this one too hard, and they suffocated it when they were embracing it. So.
Well, Guillermo del Toro, who directed Blade 2, he passed on the opportunity to direct this one, to direct Hellboy, which was a dream project of his. So that's where he went.
He made the right choice.
Hellboy is a better film than Blade Trinity. But would it have been this bad had he stayed, right? That's the question. Stephen Norrington, who had directed the first Blade, he was considered to return and direct the film, but he changed his mind after reading the script, which he didn't like. Shocking. So that leaves our friend David S. Goyer, who wrote the script. This was his directorial debut. And Goyer, clearly he's the guy that needs other solid creatives around him to succeed, because the first two Blades, he had Stephen Norrington, who had a vision for that. Guillermo del Toro. The Dark Knight trilogy had Chris Nolan and Jonathan Nolan. Even Man of Steel, we had Zack Snyder around. So this was just all written and directed by David S. Goyer, and I think that's where it all went wrong. So an early idea by Goyer for the film was it was going to be set many years after the second Blade, where vampires had finally achieved their world domination and all the humans were enslaved, and Blade would have been the last hope for humanity. And Blade's slower aging could be explained by being half vampire. But that story was deemed too dark and later dropped. Would have been a way better film than this. I would have gone with that if I were them.
Mm-hmm.
Other changes, once they kind of okay, we can't do that, let's do something else. Goyer was going to include Hannibal King, but also Rachel Van Helsing, both characters from the Tomb of Dracula comic books, which Blade came from. But then, around the same time, Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman was coming out, so they were like, well, we don't want to use that character.
As we live and breathe.
Wolverine. He didn't want to have brand confusion, because here we already start turning into the underworld Resident Evil Van Helsing things that I praised the first one for not being, right? They've kind of fallen into the trap of becoming its imitators here. But anyway, they didn't use Rachel Van Helsing, so they invented the character of Abigail Whistler, Whistler's daughter, to kind of fill that role and kind of keep it in the mythology of the characters who had existed. As I mentioned last time, Blade was supposed to have a sex scene in this film. Supposed to hook up with Whistler's daughter, but that was cut.
Good.
Yeah, that would have been... Come on, man. Now, Triple H was in the film.
It's hilarious.
His real name is Paul Levesque. Not sure how to pronounce that, because I only know him as Triple H. He does a wrestling move called the Running Power Slam at some point. Apparently, that was a signature move of him. Not the biggest wrestling guy. I have friends who... we have friends.
Yes, we do.
Right? Our peers who might be listening to this, who may or may not be. Shout to them. You know who you are. My only real exposure to wrestling was just being around it. The Rock being on Star Trek Voyager, because WWF SmackDown came on UPN after Voyager in the 90s. But also just, of wrestling video games too. I mean, that's my experience. So I know who Triple H was. I wouldn't know his real name or can tell you any of his signature moves myself.
Who's Triple H?
He's the big blonde guy with the ponytail in this, Brandon.
I don't know wrestling either.
The makers of the film, they were actually very impressed by his work ethic, his camera presence, and his performance. So the studios insisted that they write extra lines for him to make his role bigger. The old bars that the Night Stalkers use as their lair was originally a floating McDonald's restaurant built for Expo 1986 in Vancouver. I'm into these abandoned places YouTube videos, and I've watched one about this. It's really interesting. Yeah. So it's actually a cool thing to pick. It's very kind of a unique ship there. So I thought that was cool, and a smart repurposing of something that's just sitting out there floating, deteriorating. Now, Wesley Snipes and Chris Christopherson, they'd become good friends after working on the last two Blade movies. They were unhappy with the movie and with David S. Goyer's script directions. They felt there were too many characters, too many new characters, and the Blade didn't really need any sidekicks beyond Whistler. And I think we can all agree with those sentiments. There was a lot of on-set drama between Wesley Snipes and David S. Goyer regarding to his creative decisions in the film.
Did he ask him if this was a joke?
Yeah.
You think this is a joke? This ain't a sitcom.
That scene was probably not.
That was
scripted.
real.
Like, just roll. So Wesley Snipes getting mad at David S. Goyer about this nonsense. Something out of a cartoon. To that point, Wesley Snipes had almost no participation in the making of featurettes because he was like, "Look, man, I'm over this," which is unfortunate because I mean he's the star of the show. He's why you go to see these movies.
Yeah.
And to have him not like it, you know.
I don't know, man. Parker Posey's in this one.
Colin Farrell of Daredevil fame was offered the role of Hannibal King, but turned it down.
For more peanuts.
I can see why. I mean, he'd just come off Daredevil as Bullseye. So he probably didn't want to shoehorn himself into the comic villain. And hey, the movie missed out on Deadpool. So now, speaking of Deadpool, when asked what it was like working with Wesley Snipes on the film, Ryan Reynolds had said this: "I never met Wesley Snipes on this film. Not for a second. I only met Blade." I believe it. Patton Oswalt, one of the many new characters in this, he said the production was so troubled due to studio interference that Wesley Snipes appeared to have a mental breakdown at some point. He refused to speak to Goyer and would often not come out of his trailer, and he would only respond to the name Blade. And if he communicated with anyone, it would be via Post-it notes.
Wow.
Ryan Reynolds goes on to add to the story, saying Wesley Snipes would ignore the entire cast, but he only acknowledged Reynolds by saying to him once, "Keep your mouth shut, you'll live longer." I would love to just be a fly on the wall during the making of this one, because it sounds like absolute chaos. So this informs why the final product was such a mess, I guess.
The only thing that we need for behind-the-scenes footage is an audio clip of Wesley Snipes freaking out on a lighting attendant.
Why are you walking right through?
This ain't a sitcom.
Now, speaking of chaos on set, Jessica Biel inadvertently destroyed a camera costing more than $300,000 when she fired an arrow directly into the lens. She was directed to, quote, aim for the camera, which had a plexiglass shield in front of it, except for a small opening in front of the lens. But she had become such a good archer. She'd become such a good archer
Pianist.
that when she had become such a good archer that when she fired the arrow, it went directly through the lens hole and into the camera itself, destroying it.
Well, you can't get mad at her for that. I mean, like, she just did what they told him to do. Right?
True.
Yeah.
The footage is on the DVD and the extras if people want to see her destroy that.
Didn't even make the final cut? Oh, that's too bad.
Just like in Dark Knight Rises, you know, Chris Nolan loves using IMAX cameras. There's only like 2 IMAX cameras left in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And Anne Hathaway drove the Bat Cycle into one during that and broke it. It's like, come on! These are expensive things. This is why we can't have nice things. Speaking of Jessica Biel and some of the chaos that carried over to the marketing, because one of the TV commercials of the film was recalled one day after airing because it incorrectly credited Jessica Biel as Jessica Alba. Wrong Jessica, early 2000s. I understand why I get it confused. They had very similar roles for a few years there, but come on. And a deleted alternate ending had Abigail Whistler and Hannibal fighting a werewolf-vampire hybrid in a casino, potentially setting up a spin-off of the Night Stalkers in a future movie. So there's your rundown on Blade Trinity.
Holy boy, was it weird watching this movie, because this was just like walking down the streets of Vancouver. I've been there a lot, and there was a lot of Vancouver in this movie. It was really strange. Like,
absolutely. Like, so they filmed a lot of Smallville in Vancouver, and the scene where they go to the doctor's office, but it's Dracula in disguise, and they start jumping out the window. That is the same building they used for the Daily Planet in Smallville. Clearly filmed in Canada.
yeah.
Even a lot of the actors, like the bit actors and the background actors, like a lot of them were in Smallville. Like it was. It was like I was like going down the list, like that guy looks. Oh yeah,
And they had the guy from
he was in Smallville.
one of the
She was in
Cylons
Smallville.
from Battlestar Galactica. Too.
Yeah, one of the Cylons. Yeah,
he was.
Parker Posey's brother. Yeah,
Parker. Parker Posey was in this movie, man. Like, woofda.
Yeah, she's like at a 12. Like she needed to turn that way down.
Yeah. And I'm not a big fan of her, and that's like all I remember from this movie is that Parker Posey was in it, and the guy from Prison Break,
Dominique Purcell.
Yeah,
the Prison Break guy.
Mick Rory. Yeah,
I like Dominique Purcell. He was in a TV show called John Doe in the early 2000s.
Okay.
Where it's a guy who wakes up and he doesn't know his identity, but he's a genius, And I think it was like one of these one season shows on Fox got canceled, so we never got any answers.
Mhm.
But he went on from that to go into Prison Break. And then